Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is about mindset, and we're going to be talking about to stop rationalizing away your happiness. So we've all done it. We all still do it. Is we know what we need to do. We know what we want to do. What would help us towards an improvement in our lives. But for one reason or another, we don't get that thing done, so we create an excuse as a way to excuse ourselves from the responsibility of inaction. Okay, so that's what an excuse is. Our attempts to excuse ourselves away from responsibility. It wasn't my fault, it was the dog who ate our homework. It wasn't my fault I ate bad. Work didn't let me out for lunch, da-da-da-da-da. It wasn't my fault I didn't work out. I've been tired all day. I was busy in the evening. It wasn't my fault. And then insert whatever excuse you want to put in there. So we all have an excuse that we use too often, myself included. And it's something we need to recognize, that if you can think of an excuse that you're like, yeah, that's the one I use all the time, that's not good. So that means that you've been aware of it and you haven't addressed it. So excuses help us explain away what wasn't done. And that's what we do. So we know what we should do. We don't do it. So then we rationalize why we didn't do it. We create an excuse or attempt to explain away why it wasn't done. But what does that do? What does that result? Does our excuse make it that it was done? Does it replace our inaction? No, we don't get the results. So if I meant to eat a healthy meal, but instead I ate, a Big Mac and fries, but got the Diet Coke. So does our excuse for why that was an easier option, I didn't have time to go home and cook, or I'm running late between two events, fast food was the only thing I had. Does that make it that the Big Mac and fries doesn't make us fat? No. It doesn't do anything in terms of action. So an excuse does not replace action or forgive an action. So are we excused from, like when we have an excuse, are we excused from the lack of the thing being done? No, we're not. And are we set up for how to correct the issue in the future? So if we make an excuse, which in the sense of doing so means that we've identified something that was in the way of the right thing to do, does having that excuse make it so that way next time we won't ever make that mistake again? No. So we all have repetitive excuses. So we've identified why we didn't get something done, but we didn't identify how not to have that happen again. We didn't identify how to correct the situation. So we rationalize our not doing, all we're really doing by doing that is trying to convince ourselves that we're okay with it not being done. But are you really okay with it? If so, would you feel guilty? Would you feel upset? Would you feel sad or bummed out or depressed that the thing didn't get done? Would you think about it the rest of that day or maybe the next day? Would you beat yourself up for it and always say, I always do this, I'm such a failure, I never get this stuff done, I'm never going to get it done? If we rationalize or make an excuse and relieved ourselves from the responsibility of it, which is what our excuse is trying to do, why do we then still feel guilty? Why do we still feel sad? Why do we still feel responsible in some manner? Because we know that it's not true. We know that our excuses weren't true. Yes, that thing that you're excusing, like having short on time, that was true. You were short on time. But you probably still could have made a better choice, and you could have planned ahead. So somebody says like, after work, I had a kid's event, I didn't have time to eat well. Well, you knew you had a kid's event before you went to freaking work. Why didn't you prepare any food? So often we underlyingly understand and know that there was something we could have done. So even when we make an excuse, we still feel kind of bad or feel guilty because we know that there was an underlying sense of control. There was something that we could have done about it. So I think we all rationalize that we're not okay with reaching our goals and our dreams. And in a response, we all sometimes have a low level of disappointment associated with that. And the sad part is our low level of disappointment about not reaching our goals or not getting our to-do things done the sad part is that disappointment isn't significant enough to get us to change our behavior. And what I mean by that is we constantly just repeat the same bad behaviors daily, and yet we feel kind of bad about it, but we don't ever feel bad enough to actually change it. And that's what's sad, is people just kind of get into these cycles and these ruts, and they just one mistake after another mistake after another mistake. They use, the same excuse sprinkled in with a few new ones, but it's all the same idea. It's all the same concept, is that there was a manner in which you could have controlled it and you didn't. And or you felt like, I'm doing the best I can, it just doesn't seem to be enough. In those cases, you often have to get more educated. So we've talked before about why we get held back towards our goals, is we either have all the drive in the world, but we're not educated on the right things to do. Or we have the education, we know what the right things are, we just don't do them. So that's what we have to look at, is what if we didn't make excuses? What if we didn't rationalize? What if we kept the responsibility on ourselves? And it helped us to try to just get things done, to figure out how to get things done, to figure out how to have better discipline and adherence towards our actions. And hopefully with better education would be something like you're doing right now, is by listening to a podcast daily and trying to figure out, what am I missing? What's the information that I'm missing? So you want to answer those two questions. Is, do I know enough? Do I know the right things to help me reach my goal? And the other question is, am I disciplined enough? So hopefully with this podcast, and you can look through our past podcasts, hopefully we're helping you with the education aspect. And hopefully we're helping you with the discipline stuff. And that's actually what I want to talk about today, was how do we kind of improve upon our ability to get things done? So how do we stop rationalizing away our happiness and actually do the things that we know would make us happy? So I want to give you some of my top 5 things that I'm doing in my life, and they're stolen from people smarter than me, and I've probably read them in books and articles and listened to podcasts from other people and put this list together. I don't really remember exactly where I got it all, but it's something that's helping me, and I hope that it might help you guys as well. Now, the thing is you have to choose to do this. So I'm going to run through these 5, and I do all 5. And some of them are just mindset, like setting your mindset correctly, and some of them are physical actions. So if you can, try to implement these and see if they'll help. Our goal for this podcast is for you to walk away with a little bit of a sense of control over reining in the things that you repetitively don't get done, and you feel bad about, you're beating yourself up for it. So let's try to get out of that negativity. So I do that to myself in the past, and I do it to myself a little bit every now and then, but I've gotten a lot better at it. Is if I'm going to beat myself up over something, instead of being unhappy every day, I try to put actions towards that now to take back my happiness and to give myself a better sense of control over what is going on that maybe is making me unhappy. So let's run through these things, and I hope they will help you. Okay? So the first thing that I learned to do that has made the biggest difference for me is to not make excuses. So the people who are closest to me in my life, and especially recently, in the last year or so of my life, and definitely once I started taking on this business about 8 years ago, is I don't make excuses, or I try my best not to. So if I didn't get something done, I don't explain away why it didn't get done, I just say I didn't get done. So I'll often say, I didn't take the time for that. And what I mean by that is I didn't take the time for that. So no one took the time away from me. It was me. That's why the statement says I. And I didn't take the time, which means that I know I had time, and I knew that it was within my control, but I chose to do other things instead. And sometimes being able to make that statement allows you power. Well, actually, all the time being able to make that statement allows you the power over your choices. So sometimes, unfortunately, I do not get clients' programs done in time. And I try my best to tell them a little bit of the reason why. If it was a busy weekend and I was traveling with client competitions and stuff like that, sometimes having them understand that, I think, to me, it helps, because that way they'll know that they weren't deprioritized. I just had a bigger thing than normal that weekend, which might have held me back. But then I also try to get it done as quick as I can. I try not to let it become a habit. But sometimes the choices I make are either write a program or spend time with my parents, or spend time with friends, or spend time with loved ones. And sometimes the best choice I can make for my mental health at that moment is to spend time with the friends and family, or even to spend time with myself, give myself some time away from work. So I love what I do. I'm very fortunate to do what I do, but it is very time consuming. So I get my first messages every morning around 5:30, 6 o'clock, and I get messages all the day until about 9:30, 10 o'clock, sometimes even later. I usually put my phone on silent, so that way I don't get woken up in the middle of the night. But my job is 24/7 and emphasis on the 7. So when I take time off, I am choosing to not get something done. And I have to own that choice. And the reason why I have identified that is because it gives me a sense of control, it gives me a sense of power over what's going on. So the people closest to me in my life have seen that overwhelmingly there's always something that needs done. And I'm not alone. I think we all feel this way, especially if you have a family and kids. There's always something on that to-do list. So there's always something breaking. There's always something that needs fixed. There's always something that needs addressed. Kids have schedules. You got to make food. I mean, it's a never-ending list. And even if you're single, you still have things that fill up your time as well. You have goals and dreams and things you want to achieve, and it just feels like it's hard to fit everything in. So sometimes we have a situation in which there's more things to do than we have the time to do. And that can feel overwhelming. However, if you understand that it is your choice, then you can make the healthiest choice for you in that moment. And sometimes for me, that is not getting work done. I have to choose to kind of take mental health. I have to choose to go for a walk on the weekend maybe, instead of take that hour to write a program. I have to make those choices, and I have to be okay with those choices. And that's why I don't make excuses. Or at least I try not to, because you're giving your power away to something else when you make an excuse. And I don't want to do that. I want to keep the power. I want to keep the ownership of my choices. So there's a really good book by Jocko Willink, or something like that. I think that's his last name. But it's called Extreme Ownership. So that's a really cool book. So I'd kind of had this idea before that, but that's a great book that kind of drives that home. Is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, I think is his last name. Just type the title and you'll find it. But by keeping the control of your choices, you have the power to make changes. And that's the biggest thing. Is if you are in control, you can make the changes when you're unhappy. If you give your control to something else and you're unhappy, you're going to feel like you're stuck and there's nothing you can do about it. It's a mindset issue, but it absolutely does become a prison when you give your excuses away. Okay, when you give your control away to your excuses. So I try to always own up to my choices and the things I did. I don't make excuses. Now, I have in the past when somebody said, hey, I need you to get this done. Did you get it done? And I'll say, no, I didn't have the time for that. And that doesn't excuse me away from that thing not getting done, and that person will still be mad at me, and I will still have disappointed that person. However, there's nothing you can do about that sometimes. Sometimes you will disappoint people. You have to make the choice of who you disappoint and how often. So sometimes, not everybody, but there is a large majority of people that we tend to try to please everyone else and we disappoint ourselves. And we end up living a life unhappy internally. We live a life that we don't feel like is our own. And that's something that is very sad because it's a missed opportunity. You only have one life. You only have this life. And if you're not living it for you, and you're always sacrificing yourself for the happiness of others, you don't get this life back. Okay, there's no prize for that. There's no award for that. So don't miss out on the happiness in your own life. Okay, so sometimes you have to choose to disappoint everyone else so that way you can have your time. So like I said, sometimes on weekends I'll choose to go for a walk and just kind of get out of the house, clear my mind. Sometimes I listen to a podcast or an audiobook. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just want silence. But I take that time away to refresh myself, knowing that that'll put me behind on work, or knowing that that might set someone's workout schedule back. But I have to do that. I have to take care of myself because if I don't take care of myself incrementally in small doses, I will lose track of myself, and I end up living unhappy or cracking in a significant way later on. That's where people get mental burnout, you get mental stress, you end up making poor life choices, and sometimes you rearrange things in big drastic ways that you don't really need to. So the first tip I'd give you is to not make excuses. So keep the ownership of your actions, so that way you keep in control and power of changing your actions. So don't make excuses, just tell it like it is. So if you made a poor nutrition choice, say, it's like, like say for example you ate some junk food at night, just say to yourself, you know what, I wanted the food, I had the food. So I know what it felt like, I know what it tasted like, and I kind of feel guilty about it, and I know that it wasn't necessarily the best choice for me. So hopefully tomorrow I'll make a better choice. That's a much better thing than saying, oh, the cravings were so bad. Oh, I was so tired. Oh, I've denied myself all weekend. Blah, 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 blah. Just take ownership. If you wanted the food, just say you wanted the damn food and be okay with it. You're a grown adult. You can want food if you want food. So just eat the food. And if you enjoyed it and you liked it, then yay for you. At least your cheat was worth it, so to speak. But just try to keep those in mind. So we have to kind of learn how to parent ourselves and track our own habits and make sure that more often than not we're doing the right things. And one of the ways that I do that, this is number 2 part for us. So number 1 is don't make excuses. Number 2 is track your behaviors and do it in a way that is in your face. So do not hide from your behaviors. So I have a goal tracking app on the home screen of my phone, and I have a couple goals that I'm tracking at the moment. So if I click on that app, right away it says a big screen, it takes over my whole entire phone, and it shows either a check mark or an X or a blank space for that day for that goal. So if it's a current day, it's going to be blank until I get the thing done or don't get it done. If it's a day that I did well, I got a check mark. If it's a day I didn't get things done, I get an X. So what I do is I look over that, and if I have 2 or 3 X's in a row, I'll be damned if I'm going to get a third, or to get the next one. So, because it kind of frustrates you. It's like, dang it, anyhow, I said I wanted this goal, and I can see the last 2 or 3 days I've been faltering and I haven't been reaching my goal. But that's the point, is you can see it. You don't get to excuse it away. You don't get to hide from it. So I use that app because it's a freaking awesome way of holding yourself accountable. So you can't lie to yourself when there's a big fat X in your face. Okay? So get those goal tracking apps on your phone. I've even taped up a calendar to my wall when I used to live by myself. And I would check mark every day. So I'd put a big X on the calendar every day if I got something done. And if I didn't do it, I'd leave the space blank, and I'd be freaking annoyed by the end of the month when there was a couple blanks. So, but it's in your face. So, unfortunately, too often we're really good at lying to ourselves and hiding from things. So if we didn't eat our diet correctly and we're not losing weight, we can wear looser clothes. Or we can just kind of avoid the mirror, We can just kind of like, no one's going to notice, or, I can't really tell, or, one day doesn't make that big of a difference. Just excuse after excuse after excuse. Whereas if you make it in your face, and you do like we've talked about before with smiley face charts, where you get a smiley face if you do something right, if you eat a meal right, if you get a frowny face if you don't eat a meal and correctly, you eat bad food, or you get a blank space if you miss a meal. So we've talked about this, like tracking charts. And you need to do it where it's in your face. So that way you can't lie to yourself, you can't excuse away your missed opportunities. So that's number 2, is tracking things, but doing it in your face, something that's very visual. Number 3 is to create accountability. So if we're going to, like for me, I think to myself is, if I'm going to hold my clients responsible to what they want. So they said they have a weight loss goal. I tell them these are the things they got to do, and then I expect them to freaking do it. So, and if I'm going to expect that of them, I got to expect it for myself. So we have that phrase, if you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. So my accountability for my own actions is my clients and my business. So if I'm making you guys, for example, a podcast on how to control discipline and being more disciplined, then we'll be damned if I'm going to be able to do a podcast on that if I don't do it myself. So I have to show up in the ways that I expect others to show up. So I create accountability by having people around me who are awesome and making sure that I'm living and leading by example. So I want the people around me to be proud of me. I want them to use me as a staple for their behaviors, in the sense of trying to say to themselves is, man, I don't want to do this today, but I know Rob would do it, or I know Rob will expect me to do it. And if I want to instill that in them, as me being, a guiding light in their life, I have to do that for my own. So I use my clients in my business that way. So actually, just this weekend, I wasn't able to attend a client's powerlifting meet, and I hate when I can't make their events because these are big life events. But I couldn't make it this weekend, and I was kind of apologizing for not being able to make it. And the client said that they also apologize too much to people, and they had a friend of theirs who created a rule that when they apologize too much, they have to do 10 push-ups. So the client told me how to do 10 push-ups, so I filmed myself doing the 10 push-ups and I sent it to him, because I wanted him to see that I did own up to that, and I felt, and it was kind of like taking ownership of it. So he could have asked me if I did my 10 push-ups, and I could have said yes, and not done them. But that's fake, that's bullshit. I don't want to live that way. If you let yourself get away with one little lie like that, you're going to turn everything into a lie. So I filmed myself, I did the push-ups, and I stopped apologizing. So it's pretty awesome I have people like that in my life to help hold me accountable and keep me on the right track. So that's the third thing, would be to create accountability. And if you notice what I'm talking about with that, the people don't know that I'm doing it. So the next thing we have is get support from others. But if you notice, the accountability, it involved other people, but they're not aware of it. I'm using them as my examples. So things that are going to hold me steady. So for example, my clients, if I want them to behave and reach their goals with the best level of adherence, I have to do that too. So they don't know that I'm doing it. So I'm not holding it's not like if they do less well, I'm going to do less well. I'm just making sure I do well for them. So that's kind of like an accountability outside of myself. Then I have the accountability inside myself by doing the goal tracking. So tracking my stuff every day. And then finding support. So I get support from the other people around me by watching their actions and allowing people to see my actions. So the people I do spend the most time with is my mom and dad. And getting to see my mom, she trains she trains 4 days a week at the current time. We're deciding to take our 5th day. We normally do 5 days a week, but we're dropping down to 4 so she can recover better while she's getting through a sinus problem. But she never misses the gym. She's in there every damn day. She works hard to the point of almost throwing up sometimes, but she never misses anything in the gym. So that's my support from her, is I can see how hard she's working, and that helps me work as hard. So then I have my dad in my outside life. So my dad's a very good man, and even though he doesn't work out, so sorry, Dad, for calling you out on that, but he lives his life by the way that he says he should, and the way he says my brother and I should. So my mom and dad have always told us the way that we should do life, and they've always led by example. They've always done it first, and then they let their actions speak as much as their words. And that's something that motivates me. So like I said, is I want to be that for my clients and the people around me, and then I have my mom and dad to be that for me. So it's kind of like a cyclical type of accountability and support, is I want to support the people who look up to me, and then I have the people I look up to that support me. So that helps a ton. And then the last thing I do is I have a goals list, and what I do is I write down what I feel would make me happy every day. So yeah, some of the questions I have is, did I fulfill my purpose today? So for what I define as my purpose in life, did I do something that day that fulfilled my purpose? I have another question where we've talked before with podcasts where I have Nate Questel, one of the gym members, join me, and we've talked before how we are Christian, and one thing I think of, a question I ask myself every day is, would I be proud to meet God today? And did I do the actions today that if God were to call me up and want to meet, I wouldn't feel like I had to hide away, I wouldn't feel ashamed. And that's something I use. So even if you're not religious, you can think of somebody or some kind of standard that you would want to live up to, or what you use as your guiding, tracking kind of behaviors, and think, did you live up to that today? And then I have another things where did I laugh today? So I actually have to remind myself as I got to be an adult that you have to do things every day that make you laugh. something that truly makes you belly laugh, and that's such a wonderful thing in life. So I have those. So I have questions that I ask myself and things I check in on, and you notice they might not be big things. So when I talk about a goals list, I'm not talking about squatting 700 pounds. I'm talking about just daily things that I can do to make myself happier and to improve the lives of the people around me. And that's my goal. Those are the things that motivate me to do the small daily behaviors, is because I'm checking myself every day. So if you say I want a 700-pound squat, that seems so large and so distant. Or I want to lose 30 pounds. That's so large and so distant that today, this moment doesn't seem to matter. Whereas if you narrow your focus and think of just today, then everything you do today will matter. So sometimes thinking of a goals list in a daily list, rather than as like big ultimate goals, that'll make a huge difference. Okay? So, if you want to stop excusing away and stop rationalizing your happiness, in the sense of you're not getting things done that you need to get done, and you're unhappy about it, nothing's freaking changing, you feel lost, you feel frustrated, here are 5 steps that you can use. Okay? The things we just discussed. Is number 1, don't make excuses. Stop making excuses. Own your choices. So that way you have the control to change. Okay? You can change what you don't like and create a life and actions in your life that make you happier. Then you want to do in-your-face type tracking. So again, like I said, I track on my phone. You want to maybe track maybe put a chart on your fridge. So a meal chart. Maybe you have like a workout routine and you want to go to like work out every day after work. Put a note card in your visor that checks off the days that you worked out. So in your car, like in the place that you'll need it. Okay? Try to make it in your face. Then we have accountability, and that would be, what are you going to hold yourself to? So we have, like I said, I'm accountable. Who am I accountable to is like my clients and my business. So if I want those to run well, I have to do well. I have to be well. So that's what I use. Also support from others. So I have outward examples and other people that I use as kind of like my role models in a sense, and try to follow their actions and follow their lead and see that things can be done. So I've had a client who has 6 daughters, and he did 3 physique shows while running his own business, working a part-time job, and had 6 daughters. And if that dude can diet and get ready for a competition and get all his training in, well then, holy hell, do I have no excuse whatsoever. So it's awesome looking around you and looking to the people around you and try to find people who are living life the way you want to do it and use them as examples. Then the last thing we have is a goals list. And think of it every day. So every single day, what can you do that day that'll matter and make a difference and make you happier? So try to implement some of these things and see if they help. So if you're frustrated with this and if you want to try this but you're a little confused or you need a little help, reach out to us at our email, brutalirongym@gmail.com, and we'll help you out, okay? I'll help you kind of create some ideas around this or help kind of implement this into your life. So I want you guys, if you're investing into me by listening to this podcast, I want to invest back into you by making sure that we're making a difference in your life and we're making a happier life for you, okay? So reach out to me if you need help. I'm happy to help. Okay, so hopefully this information was helpful. So if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, Brutal Iron Gym. Also, if you like the podcast, you can sign up to become a patron of the podcast by donating $10 or more a month to the podcast. For a donation, we will send you programming on any goal of your choice. Just shoot us an email and tell us what you would like to work towards, and we'll send you a training program for it. And they're updated every single month. Okay? So if you'd like to become a patron, you can do so directly on the Podbean app. You can send us an email or do a Google search for Become a Patron Brutal Iron Gym Podcast. And if you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. So the more people we help, the happier the world's going to be. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love, love, love to hear from you. So this podcast is for you, so we want to know what you want to learn about. Okay? Our email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.